Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and jump in and get started. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We are really excited to host this event. And again, for those who are just joining us, please drop your name and the board or commission, task force, committee that you represent in the chat to further get to know one another. I'd like to start by as expressing my deep appreciation to everyone on this call for the incredible work that you do and for your service. And to get started, I'm going to share just a brief bit about who we are as an organization, United We, and then we'll jump into the program and have Mayor Buffalo kick us off. So to share a little bit more about United we work for change to advance all women's economic and civic leadership. And it's a tremendous team effort, including local and state partners on both sides of the aisle. So we work to unite people around nonpartisan policy issues to empower women and their families. We have, at our very core, we are an evidence-based, research-driven organization that really helps us inform a public policy agenda. But also for civic engagement, we want to see our boards, commissions really represented of the community served to make the best decisions for everyone. So on the screen here, you can see the issues that we have prioritized at United We. These issues that we have found to be at the impact and crossroads of two things. One, those most impactful in terms of advancing economic opportunity for women, and where United We is best positioned to lead change as we look forward. And none of these issues are partisan. To underscore again, we're a nonpartisan organization. Today, our objective on the next slide is really our hope is for the city of Columbia, Missouri to be a model city for effective and efficient boards and commissions, task forces, and committees. So we really want to shine a light at the great work that the city of Columbia is doing. Today, we're going to talk through some best practices to help you, inform you to move toward that goal and objective. And at first, you will see here on the screen our speakers that we will have today. Mayor Buffalo will kick us off. You'll also hear from Joni Wickham with Wickham James Strategies and Solutions. And then I'm Wendy Doyle, President and CEO of United We. And I'll talk a little bit more about Robert's Rules of Order. Joni's going to talk specifically about leadership and boards and commissions and some appointments project work as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Buffalo for you to kick us off. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Joni, for having me, but also for helping us organize this training. So for those of you unfamiliar, I'm Barbara. I'm the mayor of Columbia, but also I'm a former member of one of our commissions, a former staff liaison to one of our commissions, and now the appointer to people to commissions. And so for me, it's really near and dear to my heart that we have such an active, engaged community that volunteers their time through boards and commissions. One of the things that I often talk about is that we have over 40 boards and commissions that advise city council and our staff on issues important to our community. When I think about this, as a reminder, we're a council manager form of government. And that means that, you have your volunteer mayor and council who advise and run our meetings. And then you have a city manager doing the day-to-day. And for us on council, because often, they have other jobs that they're doing or they're pulled in all different directions, it's really important for us to hear from the voices of our community members, which is why it's so important to have dedicated individuals who serve on our boards and commissions. But I know as a former member, I know as a former liaison, and as the appointer, that takes a lot of time away from your life and you're dedicating it to your community. So just like Wendy said, and this was kind of one of my, I remember campaign goals is about efficient meetings. I want to make sure that the time that you are dedicating to your community is used efficiently and effectively, and that we actually have good two-way communication between our boards and commissions and our city council. So one of the things that I was really passionate about too was this idea of doing training. I remember when I came on to my commission, this was in 2000 and maybe 6 or 7. When I came on, I didn't feel like I really knew a lot of onboarding. I had not really interacted with the city much before that. And so really trying to figure out what role I played on this. I was quiet for most of my first few meetings. So what I'm hoping is that through effective training, and that this is the first of many, is that we'll really be empowered to have more community members comfortable having their voice heard and making sure that they're helping give that direct line of communication from our community, from our neighbors into city government. Uh, so I'm going to ask actually for our city clerk, Sheila Amin, to unmute herself and talk a little bit about our different forms of boards and commissions that we have. The clerk's office is who accepts all of the applications that we receive. They put together all of the packages that come to the city council, and they do kind of like the behind the scenes of making sure that people are on, their paperwork is all correct and everything is there. So I feel like no one knows more about our boards and commissions than our clerk's office. So Sheila, I'm going to have you come on and quickly do that.
Thank you. So as the mayor said, we have quite a few boards and commissions, and we even have some task forces and committees. And most of them, if not all of them, are appointed by either the council or the mayor with the consent of the council. There can be a few that are appointed by the city manager or his or her designee, but yes, most of them are appointed by the council and or mayor. Most of our boards and commissions are make recommendations to the city council primarily, but we do have a few that actually make the final decisions in some cases. Our Board of Adjustment and our Building Construction Codes Commissions, they approve variances of certain nature. So they are like essentially at the city level, the final decision maker. And a lot of times those appeals go to, at least for Board of Adjustment, would go to circuit court or something. And then we also have P&Z, that is kind of a regulatory kind of commission in a sense. They're established not only by city ordinance, but we follow state law with them. And they have some powers that some other boards and commissions don't. But like I said, the rest of them, or not all the rest of them, but a lot of the other ones are primarily, they make recommendations to the city council, whether it's part of their duties and responsibilities from their establishing legislation, whether that's by ordinance or resolution, or there's times where the council will say, hey, I'd like for you guys to look into a certain issue. So sometimes there's special requests by council for boards and commissions to do some work for the council. But I would say, when you're appointed to a board or commission, hopefully the staff liaisons are communicating with you and getting you that legislation that establishes what your duties and responsibilities are, what the quorums are, what the membership requirements are, et cetera, like that. Also, there's times where boards and commissions want to do something proactively, and that is wonderful, but I would point out that we do have a section of our city code that requires those requests to go through the council if it takes staff time or some financial or just money, I guess. If it takes some of that, you need to get the council's approval before moving forward via report. So I think that's pretty much the basics, that we do have a variety of boards and commissions that touch all sorts of our areas, whether it's parks and rec, water and light, our planning and zoning, climate, everything. So there's all sorts of ways for people to be engaged with the city and provide that third level of expertise. You have council that has some expertise, you have staff that has some, and then obviously our board and commissions have a lot of expertise as well as, and that's why they're appointed. And now I'll just turn it back over to the mayor.
Thanks, Sheila. So yeah, one of the things that Sheila mentioned that we talk about is that level of expertise that is needed. And sometimes what we're talking about is just that community engagement. You're hearing from neighbors, but also some of our ones that are specific to an area of expertise. That's why we have, I think, a lot of specialized areas sometimes in our boards and commissions that we request. The one thing that I will say is that coming soon, you'll be receiving a request, all board and commission members will, of a survey of kind of looking into how is it going? How is your board and commission going? Because I'll say that at times, sometimes we have boards and commissions that have fulfilled their purpose. And so I want to make sure that your time is being used efficiently. And if you need to be on a different board or commission, we want to know that. We also want to know what our boards and commissions are up to. Sometimes some boards and commissions have annual reports and we hear back. And I would like to make this more of a systematic expectation. So we know when to hear from our boards and commissions, and they know that for sure, at least once a year, they're going to be talking to their council members, if not more frequently if needed. I want to say before I give it over to Joni, I just want to say also, and again, thank you for all of your dedication and commitment to our community. I also know we have a lot of staff liaisons on this call as well. Thank you for helping connect our community members with the work that we do here at the city and with council. I know it's possible through you that they can be successful and that we can be successful. So just a big thank you to everybody, and again to United We for helping organize this training for us. Like I said, I'm hopeful it's the first of many, and that we continue to help improve efficiency and effectiveness of our boards and commissions and our city as a whole. So Joni, I think I kick it over to you next.
Thank you, Bear. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Joni Wickham, a previous resident of Columbia, Missouri. Had the great pleasure of living in Columbia while I was a graduate school student for 4 years, and moved on to live in Kansas City, Missouri, where I was the mayor's chief of staff for about 6 years, which is why I have gray hair, wrinkles, and high blood pressure. But part of that great adventure was helping to get people appointed to municipal boards and commissions. And I just really want to shout out Mayor Buffalo for her commitment to really understanding the value of community engagement through boards and commissions, and for really seeing the need to engage you all more deeply and to make sure that your experience is a great one. Also, huge shout out to Wendy Doyle, President and CEO of United We, for taking my call after 3 weeks on the job. When I was in the mayor's office at City Hall, we really saw that the community engagement on municipal boards and commissions was nowhere near what we wanted to see. And so I called Wendy and said, we have this idea that we want to get a greater diversity of residents on boards and commissions, and voila, the Appointments Project was born. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the town halls that derive some of the policy issues that Wendy talked to you about, and give you an overview of the Appointments Project. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership styles and communication styles that you may see as you encounter different issues on the boards and commissions in which you serve. So the slide that you see in front of you illustrates the town hall project that the United We team has overtaken in the past couple of years. You will see to your left the state of Missouri that has different large stars that illustrate our stops in the town hall project. Same can be said on the right for the state of Kansas, but we're going to focus on Missouri today. So in these town halls that we conducted, we heard a lot of different concerns from women, and they really illuminated some challenges that we felt like United We was well suited to be able to solve. And Wendy mentioned some of those being childcare, occupational licensing reform, but we also heard a lot about how government functions, the effectiveness of government, and whether or not citizens, women in particular, felt like government was situated in a way that solved their problems. Next slide, please. And so when we did these town hall projects all across Missouri, it really illuminated the fact that we have always known that women have to be at the table, but that these boards and commission opportunities really presented a whole nother opportunity to have even more women at the table and to enable boards and commissions to function more effectively. Next slide, please. So proud to tell you that we have more than 200 women that have been appointed through the Appointments Project. And this is an important fact for men as well, because we hear anecdotally from men all the time that when they have more women colleagues on boards and commissions, they see an increase in the effectiveness and the results-driven nature of these boards and commissions. Next slide, please. I know this guy. This is former Kansas City Mayor Sly James, currently my business partner. And as I mentioned, we started the Appointments Project 10 years ago. Time flies, way back in 2014. And we have seen an increase of women on boards and commissions in Kansas City from 32% when we started all the way to 51%. And I know Mayor Buffalo and Sheila and the whole team in Columbia are working hard to make sure that this beta testing that we did in Kansas City extends to Columbia as well. Next slide, please. Interestingly, more recent research findings on boards and commissions show that only 39% of boards and commissions, this is across the country, are occupied by women. Women are especially underrepresented on planning and zoning boards, so those power boards that often deal with money or deal with economic development. Our research shows that women are underrepresented on boards in more than 3/4 of cities across the country. And women are also underrepresented on parks and recreation boards and on housing boards. Next slide, please. So I have a couple of slides for you where we're going to talk about differing communication styles that you may see in your experience as a member of a board or commission. These communication styles are interesting to know about because often Western culture centers its communication styles on white male-centered communication styles. And by that, I mean often when we are in these boards and commissions meetings, you may hear people talking over their colleagues, people talking to fill the air, and then contrast that sometimes with people. I think Mayor Buffalo articulated that her initial experience when she was first appointed to her board was that she was very quiet. And it's important to know different communication styles so that we understand that when someone might be talking over someone else, it may come across as being rude, but it may just mean that they are excited and are excited to get to the point of solving problems. To Mayor Buffalo's example, if someone's quiet, sometimes we might receive that type of communication style as them not being engaged, when in actuality, it may just mean that they're listening so that they can form an judgment, so that they can form an opinion in order to defer judgment and make a more holistic recommendation. So that's why it's important to know the different communication styles that are out there so that you can understand the perspective that people are bringing to different situations. Next slide, please. Executive presence is a really important piece of communication styles. And whether we want to admit it, our physical presence is the first thing that people notice when we walk into the room. And that speaks to how we physically show up in a room or an environment. So this is important to understand because I'll give you an example of how I kind of messed this up. We were working on a universal pre-K ballot initiative, and I walked into a audience of working moms who had come to this town hall event after work. Many of them had their children with them, and I had come to this town hall from City Hall after a very busy day, and was kind of dressed like the woman that you see on the slide in a business suit. And it kind of gave the impression to these working moms who had showed up to kind of talk and listen and engage with me about universal pre-K that my attitude was going to be, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, or maybe even worse, I'm from the government and I'm here to tell you how I'm going to solve your problem for you, rather than me getting on their level and having them see that I also was a working mom who struggled with the childcare issue and had that firsthand experience where I could relate to them on the issue of childcare, and coming to the situation as another working mom who really wanted to empathize with what their issues were and learn from their experience. So whether we want to like it or not, our physical presence, the way we physically show up in a room, can really send a signal and get us off on a good start in a situation or a negative start. Communication presence is another component of executive presence. And this is body language. It can be how we hold our bodies, whether we make direct eye contact. You are 90% more likely to establish credibility and to be able to build consensus if you're someone who makes direct eye contact, even in a virtual setting like this. So communication presence is really important because once we get past the physical presence, it's the second thing that people notice most about people that they're engaging with. Emotional presence is also really important. And emotional presence is the way that you regulate your own emotion so that you can guide the thinking and action of others. For example, if you come into a situation and you're hurried, you haven't prepared, or maybe you're a little bit cantankerous that day, your communications presence and your physical presence can give off negative connotations that make it more difficult for you to get to the nitty-gritty of handling the issue at hand or even building consensus to solve a problem. So we always want to make sure that our emotional presence shows that we're engaged and we're ready to be in that moment. Next slide, please. Active listening. This is one of my favorite pictures of me and Mayor James of all time. Active listening is a really important communication tool. If you are engaging in active listening, you're paying attention to what the other person is saying. You're showing that you're listening. Perhaps you're going to nod your head while they're talking to you, or maybe you're going to put your phone down, even turn it over so that you can't see that iPhone showcasing your text or the time. I know I need to be a little bit better on that. If you're active listening, you're also providing feedback. If someone is talking to you in conversation, you could say something like, wow, that must have really been difficult for you to process if they're telling you some difficult news. If you're active listening, you're also deferring judgment. You're going to let the individual finish their entire thought and defer judgment to later so that you can be more empathetic to what they're telling you. And then active listeners also respond appropriately. They don't interrupt, and they also listen and defer judgment before they respond at all, and then give a measured response based on what the communicator is telling you. Next slide, please. Leadership styles. This is one of my favorite types of conversations to have with folks who are on boards and commissions, because often you can be an individual who has a very full professional life, you have a very full home life, and you join these boards and commissions not because you consider yourself a leadership expert, but because you want to serve your community and your servant leaders. So next slide, please. One leadership component to understand going into these boards and commissions is that often we can divide ourselves into results-oriented or process-oriented individuals. But the trick is understanding the differences in the two and marrying the two types of individuals so that your board or commission can run effectively. A results-oriented individual is someone who focuses on whatever solution needs to be found. These sorts of individuals often can be individuals who tend to talk more than others, usually can be extroverts, and often can, Wendy is chuckling at me because she knows I'm one of these individuals. Results-oriented individuals also tend to be fast-paced thinkers and fast-paced doers because they really embrace the fact that they're getting to the solution of a problem. Process-oriented individuals tend to take pride in the journey that it takes to get to the result. So rather than focusing on the result, they really take pride and lean in on the process that it takes to get to that result. When we were in the mayor's office, and I'm sure many of you see this in your organizations as well, there could be tension sometimes between process-oriented individuals and results-oriented individuals because results-oriented folks can sometimes get a little frustrated with process-oriented individuals, but just because we tend to operate in different lanes and at a different pace. It does not mean that one is better than the other. Let me repeat that. It does not mean that one is better than the other. It's just the way that we think differently, often communicate differently, and lead differently, but we definitely need both styles of leadership in all effective organizations. Next slide, please. I love this illustration because fairly concisely, it shows how advocacy, which very much is what you're doing in your boards and commissions, advocacy is a form of leadership. So if you see the arrow that's pointing up towards your ceiling or your sky, depending on where you are, this is a measurement for effort. And this is the effort that is needed from each leader. The arrow pointing to my right is going to be the measurement for engagement. And you'll see there are three different buckets of leadership here. A laissez-faire leadership approach is one that doesn't necessarily demand a lot of effort or engagement from the leader. The transactional leadership model is one where the leader gives a little more effort and engages the followers a little bit more, but it's much more of a command and incentivized type of framework. So the leader basically makes the followers feel like if he or she gives them something, then they're able to move that needle a little bit further. Transformational leadership, this is where the magic happens in leadership. This is where leaders use a lot of effort, but they also get a lot of engagement back from the followers. And this is where transformational leaders are able to motivate and empower others. So ideally, you're going to find room in your board or commission for you to be in the upper right-hand corner where you're motivating and empowering others. Next slide, please. United We has developed several best practices for boards and commissions to consider. One is to develop and circulate an agenda before each meeting. Mayor Buffalo and Wendy both said that oftentimes when community members go into these types of civic leadership opportunities, they really want to make sure that their time is being spent wisely. And the first thing that you can do that's a fairly easy lift is just making sure that everyone has that agenda and set clear expectations at the onset of a meeting. The second is to cultivate regular attendance to avoid quorum issues. There's nothing like getting yourself to a board or commission meeting and you don't have a quorum and you can't meet after you've gone through the effort of taking off work, getting childcare, arranging for elder care, what have you. That can really dampen the spirits of everyone involved. So you want to make sure that regular attendance is cultivated. The third is to know if Robert's Rules of Order is a requirement. And if so, to make sure training is available to all members. Wendy's going to do a little deeper dive into this portion a little bit later. But as I mentioned earlier, many of you have probably come to these boards and commissions opportunities just because you want to serve your community. And you may not have been exposed to Robert's Rules of Order in the past or all the different mechanisms that go into it. So it's important for those of you who may be in leadership in boards and commissions or leadership in the city to understand that we all have to meet people where they are. And if Robert's Rules of Order is a requirement, to make sure everyone has access to that type of training. We also want to ensure that all members understand the Sunshine Law and what is applicable for each board or commission. So this means if your records, if your emails, if your agendas, those types of things are going to be discoverable to other members of the public or even the media. United We has also found that providing mentoring and shadowing opportunities are really helpful in building confidence and also in closing opportunity gaps, particularly when individuals who haven't served before are given a role on a board or commission. And it sounds like Mayor Buffalo, unsurprisingly, is already hitting this last one out of the park with collecting feedback from appointees so that we know what's working, or maybe we better understand what types of operations need to be pivoted so that we can streamline different processes to make your experience better. Next slide. Wendy is now going to talk through a few components of Robert's Rules of Order. Wendy?
Thank you, Joni. Great overview of communication styles, leadership, and some best practices for boards and commissions. And now we're going to talk about Robert's Rules of Order. And what we've heard and learned along the way, this can actually be a barrier holding good qualified potential future candidates for boards, commissions, committees, and task force, holding them back from actually applying because they don't feel comfortable, confident with Robert's Rules of Order. What we're going to accomplish today is I'm going to share some best practices and just give you some background history about Robert's Rules of Order, provide a little bit more confidence to you. So first of all, surprisingly, we looked up the history of Robert's Rules of Order, and the current Robert's Rules of Order is now in its 12th edition that we are using today. Robert's Rules of Order is simply a guide to parliamentary procedure, and it was originally written in 1876 by Army officer Henry Martin Robert. 1876, Robert's Rules of Order has been around, surprisingly. Today, the book is considered a foremost authority on how to conduct meetings, and it's used by a number of organizations ranging from nonprofits, professional associations, and government too. So what are the Robert's Rules of Order? The book is packed with specific rules to guide every step of the meeting process, classifications of different motions, principles of debate, and even how to define different types of committee. You could spend days, years digging into Robert's Rules of Order, but today we're just going to cover the high-level version of some key points. In essence, I really want you to think of three key guiding principles of Robert's Rules of Order. We've kind of distilled it down. First, everyone should be allowed to speak once before anyone speaks again in a meeting. So everyone speaks in a meeting, Robert's Rules of Order. Second, everyone has the right to know what is happening, and speakers should only be interrupted in urgent situations. And third, consider only one motion at a time. So those are three guiding principles of Robert's Rules of Order. Everyone speaks, we try not to interrupt, and that they consider one motion at a time. So a motion. A motion, what is that? It's a discussion point. Someone makes the motion. For example, I move that we break for lunch now. That's an example of a motion. Someone must agree or second that motion that's been put on the floor to be considered. The group then discusses the motion and ultimately resolves it before moving on to the next agenda item. Motions can be resolved or disposed of in official language, several different ways. Voted on and passed. A motion can be voted on and passed unanimously, voted on and defeated. The motion could be tabled for future consideration, or it can be referred to another committee for further investigation. So some different ways a motion can be used. As you see here on this slide, motions are the primary way business is conducted within meetings. And I think this is the one thing that really gives us heartburn if you aren't comfortable with Robert's Rules of Order. When, how to make a motion, what's appropriate, really what does that all mean? And any participant is allowed to make one. So anybody on the board, commission, committee, task force, you are allowed to make a motion. Some examples of it include what you see here on the screen. The first one is a motion to amend. So use this to add, strike, or do both in an existing motion. A simple majority is required for the amendment to go through. So for example, the motion is, I move that we adjourn to go to lunch. The motion could then be amended to say, I would like to amend the motion that's on the floor to go to lunch and say that let's amend it for 1 additional hour of business and then we go to lunch. That's an example of an amended motion that's already on the floor. A motion to table. This postpones the motion to the next meeting when it must be brought back up, or it will be considered dead. A simple majority must agree to table the motion, or a 2/3 majority can kill it instead of tabling it. So motion to table. This means that you will table it to the next meeting and then it must be brought back up or the motion will be dead and no longer be brought up. Motion to postpone. While tabling only pushes a motion back to the next meeting, a motion to postpone puts it off to a specific future date. A simple majority must agree. So a motion could be postponed to a future meeting date. For example, we're going to wait to go to lunch. We're not going to listen to that motion. We're going to postpone that as an example. A motion to reconsider. If you are on the winning side of an earlier vote, but now want to change your mind based on some additional discussion or something else that evolved throughout the meeting, this requires a simple majority vote to approve it. So a motion to reconsider what was already a vote that was approved. So you can reconsider that within the meeting. A motion to limit debate. This can be really useful if the discussion is spiraling on and on and on. So you can limit debate to a certain number of speakers or specific time frame, and this requires a 2/3 majority vote. So a motion to limit debate. A motion to close debate. If you feel like there's nothing left to be said, you can move to close the discussion or call the question, taking it directly to a vote, and 2/3 majority is required. Unanimous consent. You're starting to see this more and more as a trend line with a number of boards, commissions, committees, task forces. This technically is a motion, but works essentially the same way. You call for a unanimous consent if a motion is expected to pass without objection. So the chair or leader of the meeting will repeat the request and then pause. And if there are no objections, the motion automatically passes without a formal vote. So examples of what could be considered in a unanimous consent could be meeting minutes. It could be a report that was expected. It could be the financials. All can be put in a unanimous consent to be approved and then move on to business versus taking additional meeting time for things that are easily passed. So those are some key things around motions. So I want to get back to why people use them, how they can help. So why people use Robert's Rules of Order can be extremely helpful for any meeting, in person or virtual. And we have found that the world is moving to more virtual meetings. This can be especially useful to provide constructed time, really keep the meeting moved and less likely to devolve into chaos or confusion. So Robert's Rules of Order really helps to keep the meeting on track. This is something that we've heard time and time again through the appointments projects, through some of the research that Joni cited, is that this really deters good people from actually raising their hand to serve, is just if the meetings aren't efficient and concise. And so that is, objective that we heard from Mayor Buffalo too. This is something that the Robert's Rules of Order can help with. The Robert's Rules of Order are also promote fairness. Everyone gets to speak with little or no interruption, diplomatically tempering those who like to hear themselves talk. They also are helpful and charge those with running the meeting can be more active participants that can take part in the discussion. This also includes taking meeting minutes, as motions make it easier to record everything that is happening and to accurately capture the discussion points by using the motions in the Robert's Rules of Order. Of course, they are not perfect. They can be overly cumbersome, but if we stick to really the specific guardrails of just the basics of Robert's Rules of Order, we assure you, you will find efficiency in running your meeting. So how do we leverage the rules in today's landscape? Robert's Rules of Order are meant to keep things running smoothly while promoting fairness and equity. But in today's environments, following them to the letter can overwhelm the process. So you could take it to the extreme. So I encourage you to find a balance of in between of how to utilize them to keep the meeting moving efficiently, but don't bog the meeting down by overly complicating it with Robert's Rules of Order. One of the best things about the rules is they can encourage courtesy, professionalism, and etiquette. Your board or commission members will feel seen, heard, respected, and they like that they're part what feels like more like a team. The rules can also boost productivity. Every minute board or commission members, task force, or committee members spend in a meeting is a minute they're not actively working in their day-to-day work or spending time with family. So keeping meetings on track makes them shorter and less likely to cause frustration. Who can call a meeting? Robert's Rules of Order can dictate that a designated impartial chairperson can call a meeting at any time, as can any two members of the committee. So what constitutes a meeting is two people. So anyone can call a meeting, and two people who actually meet, that constitutes a meeting. How to call a meeting to order. According to the rules, the chair can start a meeting by formally calling it to order by using a phrase such as, I hereby call this meeting to order. And this is when the meeting minutes officially start, and the meeting minutes are to be captured when the chair or the leader calls the meeting to order. So again, I hereby call this meeting to order. The next slide, how to run a meeting. Robert's Rules of Order lay out the following steps for running a meeting. Calling the meeting to order is just like we talked about. The chairperson is responsible for this step. Taking roll call is an official part of meeting minutes, but this also can just simply be documented and included in the consent agenda. Read and approve past meeting minutes. Consider distributing the previous meeting minutes in advance so that the board, commission, committee, task force can review them and can improve them quickly. Again, a best practice is we're seeing now more trend line is the roll call. The meeting minutes reports are actually part of the consent agenda to approve in the board meeting. Review reports. These might include reports from officers, the board, and other committees. This could also be considered part of the consent agenda. Address high priority agenda items, also called special orders of business, and these items are typically time sensitive. Dealing with unfinished business. If you weren't able to complete all of the business from your previous agenda, this may be a place to bring it forward from the previous meeting. Cover new business items. Turn to the current meeting's agenda to tackle new items, and if you run out of time, any unfinished business automatically rolls to the next meeting. And then adjourn. The same person who called the meeting to order should also formally adjourn it. So just some basics of how to put the agenda together. And again, some best practices that we're seeing trending is the roll call. The past meeting minutes and reports are included in a consent agenda on the board meeting or the meeting agenda. We've covered a lot here. There is so much more that we can potentially cover with Robert's Rules of Order, but wanted to give you some basics. So what I'd like to suggest here before we move to more questions and answers is if we together practice doing a motion just to see if you were paying attention. So if I'm the board chair and I say, is there a motion to adjourn, to table this meeting to move into happy hour? Is there a motion? Is there a motion that we could put on the floor? Who in the audience would like to make a motion similar to that? And then we'll ask for a second. Is there a motion?
I move that we adjourn this meeting to go to happy hour.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you for the second. So we have a motion and a second to adjourn to go to happy hour. Is there any discussion from the group?
It seems a little early to go to happy hour.
Seems a little early at 1:44 to go to happy hour. It's a great point, Carol. Is there any other discussion?
I respectfully disagree, Carol.
We have a respectfully disagree. Okay. Is there any additional discussion before we move to a vote? We have a motion, a second, we've had discussion. All right, well, let's take this to a vote. All in favor of adjourning to go to happy hour, say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed, the same sign. Aye.
Aye.
Oh, we have opposition of not going to happy hour. Well, if we, any additional, I really feel that we have a majority, more than 2/3. So the motion carries and we will officially adjourn to go to happy hour. This is a perfect example of way to use strong executive presence to get to happy hour. Thank you, Joni. That's an example. So with that, we've covered a lot, and we want to be efficient with our time today, but we wanted to hear from you and open it up to your questions and feedback. So please, Joni's available. Looks like Mayor Buffalo is here. We have Sheila that's available too. We're happy to answer any questions to really help us get to effective and efficient boards and commission task force and committee meetings. Any questions?
Well, I have an observation and I do have a question. My observation is that as a member of one of our boards and commissions, I was never informed that we use Robert's Rules of Order. That was never formally communicated. I have no objection to using them. I'm just stating that it was never formally communicated, and I haven't seen it communicated to any other new members. And the question I have is, I don't fully grasp the notion of a consent agenda. So, for example, we do record in our minutes who was present and who was not present at meetings, but I'm not really familiar with the idea of a roll call. I remember doing it in elementary school, but never in a board and commission meeting. So would you be able to elaborate?
Sheila, would you just take, the use of Robert's Rules of Order, and then I can address the roll call and consent agenda.
So we, as the City of Columbia, even with our council meetings, do not follow Robert's Rules of Order strictly. There are some basic concepts that we utilize that follow along with Robert's Rules of Order, but we don't use it in the strictest sense. But for council meetings, I will say they are a little bit more formal. And so we do roll call, and we do have a consent agenda at the council level. But I can see that for one of our normal boards and commissions, they hit upon each topic on the agenda. They don't have a true consent agenda. And I mean, we make motions, we do seconds, sometimes have voice votes or roll call votes, just depending on the situation. And we do, at least at the council level, we do table things, and I'm sure things are continued at board and commission levels as well, but we're not as formal as some, but we did follow a lot of what you mentioned about Robert's rules, just not to the T.
And Mayor Buffalo, please.
And I'll just also add, I asked them to kind of go over Robert's rules because we do have some who ask if we use it, or basically, since it is kind of a sort of a best practice to loosely follow, just to make sure we have efficient meetings. So yeah, it's not required in most of ours, but we do try to kind of stick to, especially the part about everybody speaks at least once before so we don't have people that kind of just continue taking over a meeting. It's a good practice to follow. At the same way with the active listening piece. And then for us, you'll notice sometimes in council meetings, we have to finally just get to, I need a motion on this, because we could discuss some of these issues and we have in the past until 2 a.m. So I'd rather, if we need to table it, we do it. And I see the same thing happening in some of our boards and commissions that I think would be useful for them.
Sounds like you might have some results-oriented leaders, Mayor.
And Carol, it's a great question. Again, to underscore, we just hear time and time again, it is, and this is what we're sharing today could be applicable to, other parts of your world. And we just wanted for you to have an overview of Robert's Rules of Order. And
I
then
observed that we're using them, but I'm just stating that it would be helpful for all boards and commission members to have a better understanding of them and an understanding that we are going to use them in some fashion.
Yeah. And I think, part of what Joni shared of having an agenda, perhaps having, times allotted on the agenda, calling the meeting to order and adjourning could just be some basic things that a board or commission task force committee implements. And to the question about consent agenda, that is really things that could be reviewed in advance of actually showing up to the meeting. And then there's always the opportunity, if there is something that is not correct, perhaps in a meeting minute, it's pulled out of consent agenda and then reviewed separately and noted in the meeting minutes. So there's some ways to do it, but just, some best practice. And we're seeing this trending because it helps move the meeting along. So I hope that answers about consent agenda.
I had a question. One of the things you brought up was it only takes 2 people to constitute a meeting.
Yes.
But when
Yes.
you're voting and stuff, is that only under Robert's rules, or because I don't know that applies. A lot of the boards I've sat on, they had to have a certain majority of people attend.
Right. It doesn't mean that you have official voting work in with only 2 people because of that, but it does constitute that 2 people getting together constitutes a meeting. Sheila, anything you want to add?
So I thought you were talking about calling a meeting.
Calling a
you
meeting to order, but it's also constitutes a meeting. 2 people or
Okay.
more constitutes, if you have 2 people meeting, that's a meeting. Getting constitute.
I think all of our boards and commissions have quorum requirements, and so they cannot meet unless there is a quorum. They cannot do official business as a board or commission unless there's a quorum present. And then for all votes, it is most of them are simple majority of the members, but there are a few that have a little bit of a higher standard. Like I believe planning and zoning requires 6 yeses instead of their simple majority, which would be 5. Board of Adjustment requires 4, when their simple majority would be 3. So so there are some variations, and the legislation establishing the board and commission identifies that. And because we have the sunshine law and the way we create agendas at the city level, our staff liaisons work with our commissions, primarily the chair, to set the agenda for future meetings based on prior meeting discussions and things of that nature. So our staff liaisons kind of help with that. And most of our boards and commissions have regular meetings, whether it's monthly, every quarter, or whatever. But there are times that special meetings have to be held, and our staff liaisons kind of help coordinate that.
Great. Thank you, Sheila. Other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. Joy, do you have a question? No. Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you feel comfortable dropping it in the chat, feel comfortable in doing that as well.
Hi, I had a question. I'm a new member. I've been on the board for about 1.5 years, and I joined because I have experience with vice president and president of the Lions Club in another state. And it's different here because of the fact that we basically, came to the meeting. Everybody who showed up, and talked. We didn't talk over each other. But I joined the Lions Club because I was given the gift of sight, and I thought that this would be very good. But I also had a question. Would there be a possibility? I'm one of the members on the Disability Commission, and I would like to see other commissions started to help the needs of people who are high functioning disabled, where because lack of funding on the buses, it's hard to get around, but other commissions where, we teach other people about not just the committees and what other people can do to help, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and Mayor Buffalo, I may ask you to address, but I think that's the value of the survey instrument that Mayor Buffalo is talking about, just to ensure on point with the work that's happening or opportunities. Mayor Buffalo, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll say that is part of the feedback we know. And I know we're also in the process, and I think Kathy, the Disabilities Commission it was our pilot for this, for also the virtual participation in different boards and commissions to make it more accessible to those to serve. And so kind of going through that process to find out how it can be easier. I will say in addition to the survey for board and commission members, you're obviously aware we're talking about transportation and our investments we need to make for that. And that will actually be our council work session on Monday. And so for all of those issues, that is one of our goals, is to become more accessible for us to have abilities for our voices to get onto city issues.
But what if you don't have access to the internet? I'm at the library and they're very
Oh.
short. Yeah, I don't have, access to internet. I'm not gonna get into it, but it's just, I'm at the library using their computer. I would like to serve as, a mentor, with people with disabilities because of all my experiences, being the Lions vice president, the president, having the gift of sight here in Missouri. I was legally blind, so I would like to somehow get involved with, like, I don't know. I don't know what is all available.
No, that's a good one. And I don't know, Sheila, if you're still on, or I might reach out. I think obviously Adam would have your contact information. And so I might give you a call offline
Okay.
to talk about some opportunities and what you saw in that other state for what we could do to replicate here.
Okay. Thank you.
Steph, you had a question. Thank
Yeah.
you, Kathy.
In your experiences with other cities, what other tools or methods of communication do you find that boards might have to communicate in between meetings? So coming from a corporate world, especially insurance, where absolutely everything is regulated and everything is recorded, I found here that a lot of our ways of communication are very analog, in person. We really only get a couple of good hours a month in person. And if I want to communicate with other board members, I need to email the city, who then forwards it on. And when I mentioned the thought of like a sunshineable Teams chat, you would have thought that I was talking about making pie on the sun or something. They weren't, they acted like it was an unusual request. Do other cities have easier methods of communication as a team that are still sunshineable besides email, manually emailing?
That's a great question. Joni?
Yeah, so based on my experience in other cities, I think email is pretty standard and the most used tool. In a couple of cities, and I will say the cities that that I have experienced this tool and the tool Slack, they are large cities that typically have a staff person per boards and commission so that they can help manage that communication flow. So I would say email is the most widely used tool, followed by Slack, but I have only seen Slack in larger cities, like I said, where there is a staff person for almost every single board or commission to kind of help navigate that.
Absolutely. I get that. I'm sad that email is the most modern thing we have for this method of communicating, but
Sheila?
Well, the thing that I'd like to add, and Earl, if he's still on this call, he can add to it. I think the real issue is the sunshine law.
yes.
And if even by email, if you have a quorum of the board or commission replying back and forth for more than maybe one or two times about city or that board or commission business, that constitutes a meeting that hasn't been posted and doesn't allow for the public to participate in. So that's what the bigger constraint, unfortunately, is our state law on our state sunshine law, basically.
I had a
I
question.
think, yeah.
Sorry.
Steph, did you have anything else?
No,
No,
I thought someone else had a question. No, I mean, the public sector, I understand, has regulations, as do certain parts of the private sector that have, I guess, have different ways of adapting to communication. Someday we'll get there, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing it out for the question. There's a couple of comments in the chat from John. From perspective of a board member, I sense there are some barriers impeding the communication efficiency and effectiveness with the city council members. Any thoughts? Mayor Buffalo?
Yeah, so, well, one of the questions, and I'm hearing some feedback, so but I don't know if it's me or you all.
Yeah, can we mute?
I will say, one of the questions actually in our board and commission report that's coming out is a request about also like an annual report, which some boards and commissions have and some don't, which is a good way to kind of give some of that feedback to council. I will say one of the best ways to get information to council is to have your staff liaison put it on as a report. So we get a lot of times requests from our board or commission if they either want to go in a direction on if there is an area of concern or an opportunity for improvement that they see and they want the city to go in that direction. Usually the staff liaison, you'll vote on your meeting on kind of the consensus of the group, and then your staff liaison will put it on an upcoming city council agenda. And then that gives the opportunity both for the chair or a member to come and give that feedback to us at a report, as well as give the direction, again, whether or not council can give you that direction then of, yes, staff, this is something we make a motion in a second and vote in consensus on to go in this direction. Or it does give council an opportunity to say, like, we understand, but right now the priorities are, elsewhere, or we want to focus on something else. It's a good practice to get into is to have that on there. Sometimes I will get letters from individual board and commission members or emails that are coming into me that are useful to know on information. But Sheila will tell you a best practice is to make it be on a council agenda, because then it's got an official record, the public can see it, but also you get our attention and our feedback at that moment, which is way better than she did or did not reply to my email. So that's one way that I encourage. And so I think one of the things we're hoping to get out of the survey is how many boards and commissions have annual reports or what their continuing feedback is to council. And then establish some best practices on making sure that everyone at least has one moment before council, if not more.
Thank you. Other questions? Carol, I think we got yours in the chat answered. So are you good? Her question was, my understanding that if two people from the same board or commission want to speak to each other, the communications are considered a matter of public record. Is this correct? And the answer is yes.
Thank you for answering my question.
Other questions?
I had a question.
Yes.
Because of the committees meeting in the evening, because I know people work and have, whatever they do during the day. And because of the lack of transportation, would there be any way of being able to get to meetings, say if you don't have friends, family? Because I want to know what's going on. And a lot of times, I don't want to sit through 2 or 3 hours, just the basic. And because the transportation stops, you can't get to the meetings. I don't know if that's, reasonable to say any of that, but just out of curiosity.
Watch them online. I know you can't participate, but I watch them online.
Yeah.
Can't wait until more meetings are online. That will help a lot.
Okay.
Right. More online meetings. Sheila, anything you'd like to add for Kathy?
I do know that that's a issue that's been brought up in the past, and I know that they tried to work on that some, and I don't know how successful they were. Hopefully this transit study that is going to be discussed this coming Monday will shed some light on whether we're able to expand our public transportation routes and hours and things of that nature, and what it's going to take and how long it's going to take. We do have paratransit, but I am not the expert on that, so I am not sure the hours that paratransit runs and if they run in the evening. Kathy probably knows better than me on that topic, and I'm guessing that that's not available, otherwise she'd utilize it.
Great, thank you, thank you. Any other questions? Joni, any final thoughts?
I just appreciate the questions that we got. I think it really shows a tremendous willingness for folks to engage and maybe even engage at a deeper level, which is the point of all of this. So thank you all for spending time with us today. We appreciate it.
And I know this is, I'm going to ask Mayor Buffalo if she has some final thoughts, but I know this is simply a starting point, and I want you to know that we are so honored to be a part of this because the city of Columbia has stepped forward. You are a leader. This hasn't happened in most municipalities across the country. So you're the first, and we're so honored for you to be the first because we know you're going to be efficient and really take boards and commissions to the next level. So Mayor Buffalo, any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you, Wendy and Joni. I appreciate your partnership with this, and obviously Sheila in the city clerk's office for helping organize, and all the staff liaisons that are on. But more also to our board and commission volunteers. I really do appreciate the time that you've given our community. And yes, Wendy, this is the start. You know, when I was on a board or commission, there was no training, there was no consistency, but we did survey our board and commission members. So I'm happy to bring that one back in, just like we did the reception celebrating them a few weeks ago. For me, it's really important that these voices are here. We want to be accessible. We want to make sure we're making the connections to make our city our tagline of the best place for everyone to live, work, learn, and play. But I know for me, at the end of the day, it's also to make sure that you are getting your voice out there. You're helping elevate voices that are not heard often in city government, but that you're also able to go back and enjoy your lives and help improve our quality of life, but also making sure that your time is used effectively. And so I know that ongoing training is part of that. So I imagine there will be other topics that we'll go over in the future. Appreciate your feedback on how this one went. Again, like I said, this is the first one, so we'll learn every time we come, and these questions help us improve it every day going forward. So thank you, and thank you again, Wendy.
Thank you, Mayor Buffalo. And there was a question from Sunita about, will we share this recording? Happy to do so. We'll share this recording back out. But with that, we're going to conclude our presentation today. And thank you again for joining us for your leadership and service. Have a great rest of the day. And thank you, Mayor Buffalo, Sheila, and Joni Wickham. Thank you so much.